Alright y'all, welcome back to part 3 of my custom kayak build. Today we're going to be taking the motor control and moving it forward so you can easily access it while you're fishing. What you're going to need for this project is a drill with the appropriate size drill bit, some 14 gauge wire, some 1/2 inch finishing screws, screwdriver, electrical tape, some heat shrink, some solder, your soldering iron, some duct tape, and a pair of wire strippers. The first thing we're going to want to do is take the motor control apart so we can disconnect the wires that are inside. To do this, there are 6 screws located on the bottom. You just get a Phillips screwdriver and take those out. After you get all 6 screws out, the top of the motor control housing should just pop right off. From there, you're going to want to come around to the back and disconnect all 6 of the wires that are connected to the motor control. Now you don't have to worry about remembering where these go, because right here on the switch it is labeled with which pin goes to which wire. After you've removed the motor control switch, just take the red and black battery cables and move them off to the side. That way you can get the 4 wires that run down to the motor and unclip them from the bracket. These 4 wires that run down to the motor are held in place by this little clip right here. So to get it off, you just push them through the clip. Next, we're just going to undo the screw that's holding the motor control case on top of the shaft by getting a Phillips screwdriver and then just unscrewing it. Be careful when you're unscrewing it that this little nut up front doesn't fall and get lost. Okay. Next thing you're going to want to do is take your screwdriver and then just pop this screw out the hole. And this whole housing just comes off and pull the wires through. Set that off to the side. What I like to do after I take the motor control housing off is feed this bolt back through the hole and put the nut on it. That way we don't lose either of these 2 pieces. From there, we're going to be cutting these 4 wires. You're going to want to leave enough distance from the top of the shaft to where you cut it that you can still strip some of the insulation off and then solder new wire to it. So now that we have our 4 equal lengths of wire cut, what we're going to do is take one of them, put a small piece of heat shrink, slip it down the wire, and then strip a piece of the insulation off. And you're going to pick what color you're working with over here at the shaft and strip about the same amount of insulation off. After that, you're going to take the 2 wires and twist them together. Then get your solder and soldering iron and make that connection a little bit more permanent. So after you have the 2 pieces of wire soldered together, you're going to want to take your heat shrink and slide it back over the part that you just soldered. Then get something hot like the soldering iron to heat it up and shrink the rubber. This also works using a lighter. The easiest way to make sure that the right color wires get connected back together is to work on one wire at a time. So right now I'm working on the red wire. And I'm going to want to take the same process I did over at the shaft and do it with this end of the wire. So after you've repeated the process 4 times and have all 4 of your wires done, you're going to want to take your electrical tape and line up your wires and wrap them together to keep them out of your way and stop them from getting snagged on anything. Now that you're done taping up your wires, what you're going to want to do is grab your duct tape and tape up around the end of the shaft so it protects the wires, prevents water from getting in there, and makes it to where they don't get bent over and crimped at a rough angle. After you have your wires run where you're going to want them, you get the base of the motor control housing and feed the wires back through the bottom. After the wires run back up through the bottom of the motor mount, motor control unit, you're going to want to reinstall the wires into this clip right here and loop them back around to the back of the housing. The battery wires will just follow the same path they were on when you took this apart. Next, you're going to get your switch and reinstall it. When you're reinstalling the motor control switch, it's really important that you get this bracket and this bracket lined up with the channels on the housing. That'll help keep this in place, so when you pull on the extendable handle, it doesn't come too far out and break. You're going to want the switch itself to be turned a little bit. Otherwise, this top piece right here will get stuck and not allow you to fully close the housing. So now that you have the switch reinstalled in the bottom half of the housing, all you're going to do is read what color wire plugs into which prong on the switch itself. After you have all the wires plugged in and tucked in nicely like this, you can take the top half of the motor control housing and just reinstall it like it was when you took it apart. And then from there, just flip it over and reinstall the screws. Alright, so the last thing we need to do for this project is mount the motor control to the boat. To do that, I got this right angle bracket that you just drill a couple of holes for your screws. And then using your 1/2-inch screws, secure the bracket in place. From there, you're going to line up the motor control where you want it to be. And then just like before, drill your holes and mount your screws. Alright everybody, this concludes the build portion of the project. Now we are able to steer with our feet and turn the motor on from where we're sitting. If you check back in with us on the next video, we're going to take it out on the lake and test it, see how well it works.